RCR with Paul Brennan.
Here at RCR, it's time to welcome back Tony Gosling, a former BBC reporter, now investigative journalist. You can listen to him on the Not the BC FM political show, which broadcasts from Bristol in the UK. We've chatted with Tony quite a few times now. He's beaming in from Croatia. And Tony, did I leave anything out of the bio there in the intro?
Well, look, the couple of main strands in my past is obviously the journalism, which I started in late 1980s in London, when journalism was actually different, very different to what it is now. The Thatcher era led to massive changes and privatisation, including changes within the BBC, which got rid of a lot of the best people and turned it into this hideous creature that we see today. I was very lucky because the people who were training me very much were old school journalists, and we saw ourselves as servants of the public. We were paid from taxpayers' money, effectively civil servants. And if you listened to Greater London Radio, where I was working at the time, we had millions of listeners in London, but everybody that listened to that station, Paul, knew that the station was batting for them, and that we were out there trying to sleuth everything that people in London needed to know for their sake. So it wasn't a commercial station. And so I like to think I try and carry on that ethos, really, in that it's the listener, it's the consumer of the news that comes first. And you find this in journalism nowadays is utterly compromised with, so for example, Home Affairs correspondents in London for all the newspapers and broadcasters are there really to just spout the propaganda from the intelligence services, from MI5, and they are PR agents for those. In fact,
that's what I was going to ask you. Are these people journalists? I mean, there's still journalists around, I get that, but at the mainstream level, where you and I both used to work, because I did a long time in that as well, I'm wondering if there are actually any actual journalists in that media scape anymore, or are they propagandists or something else? I don't know.
Well, there are a few, but they have a lot of them are. I mean, we've just had Melvyn Bragg retiring, for example. He was a producer and a journalist, and he's been doing this for many, many years. He was well known for his involvement with things like, I think it was Jesus Christ Superstar he helped produce back in the 1970s. And, he's managed to hang on in there, but it's just a few like him who have managed to hang on. And I think most of the journalists I listen to now, I take what they say, particularly the financial guys and the Home Affairs people, with a pinch of salt, because I know they're just saying. And what happens is if they contradict the official view about something, they will find themselves being starved of press releases, starved of contacts by the big guys. So, you end up being just a mouthpiece for what the government thinks, and the government is increasingly becoming a mouthpiece for what BlackRock thinks. So that's why people are so turned off from mainstream press and have turned to social media. But of course, that with Musk and Zuckerberg has got its major problems too.
Okay, so I'm wondering then, knowing all that, what has just happened in London over the weekend just gone? I've been interested to see the reporting take on that, and I've seen it kind of vary. But here locally, they're calling it a far-right demonstration.
Yeah.
I mean, you can believe your own eyes, right? I saw the video. They weren't Nazis. They were like everyday people, it seemed to me. The anecdotal reporting from it is that it was just, your average kind of concerned citizen, though there was a few theatrics on the main stage, let's say. So what's your view on the reporting, the slanting, if there's any of the reporting, and kind of because there were no politicians there apart from no mainstream politicians there. They seem to stay away. There seems to have been a disconnect between the people and that class. How would you describe the way it was transmitted, reported, however you want to describe it?
Well, let's take it in two stages. First of all, why did people turn out? And secondly, what was going on the main stage? So people turned out because they're extremely dissatisfied with the management of the country, particularly through the cost of living crisis with the highest energy prices anywhere on earth. This is domestic stuff, for our electricity, gas, and this is all pegged. It's a massive fixed market, a rigged market by the energy cartels. So that's one of the main reasons is the cost of living crisis, the mortgage and renting crisis, the housing crisis, largely fueled by mass migration. And that, of course, that mass migration is making things worse in terms of wages. It's driving down wages, importing cheap labour. And so there is a sort of macro management of the economy which is going on, which is making Britons poorer and poorer. It's also people are seeing around their friends and family and in their local towns, they're seeing many small businesses collapsing because of the hike in national insurance rates by this Labour government. We're also seeing farmers going bust and having to sell up because of inheritance tax charges. I mean, everybody in the sort of middle class, small business sector, actually including within my family too. We've seen businesses over the last few years collapsing, being bought up by big multinationals, hostile takeovers sometimes if they're public businesses. So there is, it seems, a complete collapse in the ability of people to have, first of all, have confidence that there are regulators out there doing something, but secondly, actually to be able to feed their kids, to be able to keep a roof over their heads. So that's why people, I think, were mainly turning out and pointing the finger at mass migration and pointing it at the government, not at individual migrants. I don't think anyone really, well, very few people blame the individuals who are just trying to make a better life for themselves, but the finger has been pointed at the, and also, of course, the other thing is the flag waving, right? So this is, I think, is also because the idea is that Britain is a terrible country that's done terrible things through the empire, and anyone that sort of celebrates British culture or Britishness, whether it's music or this sort of thing, is some kind of evil person. This is a kind of generally left-wing view, and so that's why people were out on the streets. I know it's a bit of a long way to explain it, but
that's good to hear. Yeah.
What we see on the stage is something very different because they had this Unite the Kingdom campaign over the last few weeks, and people putting flags up. And of course, there's quite a lot of people out there who will do that anyway. They're not racists, but they just feel that the country is being driven into the ground. They want to say, well, this is actually my little bit of land here, my house or whatever, even if they're a council tenant or whatever. And so here's a bit of England. But up on the stage, you've got a completely different picture. And in fact, Clive Lewis, the Labour MP, did a really brilliant article on Facebook. He didn't put it on his main page, but he was saying how actually most of the people that went on the march weren't interested in the speakers. But of course, the mainstream press does focus on the speakers. The main speaker and main organiser being Tommy Robinson, who's this pro-Zionist guy who has successfully taken over from the old British National Party, which was quite racist. It had a lot of racists in it, but it wasn't pro-Israel. He's turned the whole English national movement into this anti-Islamic, anti what he calls grooming gangs, which is a way of talking about Muslims. And he blames the Muslims for everything. Of course, this just plays into the hands of the genocidalists. And one of the most extraordinary sights was to see these Maoris doing a haka against Palestine and standing there on the front of the stage and tearing the Palestine flag in half. Now, I'm looking at this thinking, hang on, there's a genocide going on. The empire did do genocide. It did a particularly nasty genocide to the Aboriginals. And I would have thought that you Maoris would have understood what a genocide is. So what on earth are you doing criticising the people who are being slaughtered in Gaza, for God's sake? So the whole thing seems to me to be an attempt to politicise in a pro-Israeli fashion what are genuine grievances, masses of genuine grievances against the British government and their policy of supporting genocide. So very twisted and bizarre operations on stage, but some legitimate concerns amongst the people marching.
I find that quite fascinating, the Zionist support element of this. And I'm wondering how that became something in a patriotic movement thousands of miles away.
Money. What happened in the 2000s? Nick Griffin talked about this quite a bit. Is that the Zionists came along to the British National Party with money, and they said, "We would like to fund you." And then Nick Griffin said, "Well, no, we don't want to be funded by a foreign power. Thank you very much." So he was then booted out of the British National Party around about the same time as the creation of the English Defence League, with Tommy Robinson and some of his far right Nazi-leaning friends. And the rest is history. So there's a definite attempt, and I think this is happening in many countries, for the Zionists to hijack these nationalist movements. So the idea is they're creating this globalization. They're attempting to globalize using finance capital around the world, particularly in the West, and they also want to control the backlash. So I see it like a chessboard. They want to control the white pieces on the chessboard and the black pieces on the chessboard, and so everywhere you look, you're captured. But the fact is, many people who go out on these marches don't buy into any of this racism, and they just simply see themselves as stateless in a way, because there's nobody politically representing them at all out there, and the mainstream press totally ignores them. So you get the mainstream press with Tommy. One of the things I noticed was over the years, I'm always listening out to hear voices from these political rallies on the BBC and on Sky, ITV, Channel 4, etc., on the TV, on the radio. You never hear them, never, except on Sunday morning. My ears pricked up as I heard croaky Tommy Robinson's voice being put out on I think it was on LBC, the national LBC channel, talk radio channel in the UK. And there he is going on and on and on, straight from the stage of this demonstration. Well, what does that tell you? I mean, they never ever put any of the pro-Palestine speakers, Corbyn or whatever. They might have them on, but they never their speeches on one of these political rallies.
Okay, so Tommy becomes acceptable if he transmits the pro-Israel line. Is that really what you're saying?
No, the press is basically advertising him as the representative of tens of thousands or 100,000 or so flag-waving British nationalists, and of course this helps his cause, doesn't it? From a point of view of him getting support from the public. But he's funded. The guy is funded, by largely by the Zionist lobby. A lot of the money comes from them, and people don't realise that at all. And that is never spoken about. So the point here is that the far right gets on the news and gets advertised on the news bulletins, but the anti-genocide campaigners never ever get to be heard. Even they get talked about by the journalists, but you never hear them. So it's quite obvious bias by the mass media for anyone that's paying attention.
We have that bias here too. And to speak to the point you made about the Maori people ripping up the flags, here there is a confluence of people who are supporting Palestine, but also on the extreme, they're the same people who are on the extreme left who are promoting LGBTQ in schools, so on and so forth. So unfortunately, you get that kind of attachment, right? The perceived attachment. So the Maori on the stage that you saw, they're fighting more than one thing in their minds, and it's easy to associate Palestine because the people that they don't politically accept, and many of us don't because they're kind of crazy, and we've seen what happened to Charlie Kirk, but they conflate everything. If you're LGBT promoter and you're also supporting Palestine, well, the Palestinians must be bad as well. You see how it works?
Well, I don't follow the logic at all because really the opposite is true.
Well, there is no logic.
Yeah, there isn't. No.
Doesn't need to be.
This is what they try and do. I mean, this is very Orwellian, isn't it? The way they sort of, it's almost like the enemy has changed every day and you're not supposed to notice. So yeah, I
Yeah.
mean there is no the Palestinian people, by the way, are not LGBT, so they're completely the opposite. And actually, the you mentioning Charlie Kirk, it looks like there may well be some sort of trans lobby connection to this alleged. It's interesting, isn't it? So you got Tyler and Tommy, Tyler Robinson over in the United States, who's the alleged killer
And
of
Tommy
Charlie
Robin,
Kirk.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Tommy in London. But anyway, so the interesting, for me, the most interesting thing about this arrest of the Kirk's alleged killer is that what you've got is he won't talk to the cops. The police have said, well, he's just not cooperating, he won't say anything. That to me is a big red flag. So, I mean, if it was just something that he just suddenly decided to do as a kind of lone wolf, I can understand that, he would just be wanting to, you know, talk a bit about why. But if he's been somehow sworn to silence, if he's part of some sort of death cult or a cult of some sort, if he's been groomed online into this or face to face with individuals, then this is the way that you'd expect him to behave. I'm saying absolutely nothing, using his rights not to talk at all about why he did what he did. And maybe things will come out in court that haven't so far, but it may be that he just keeps quiet. So the way these things work, I think, there's a balance between the two possible ways this happened. So it may be that he's just been encouraged to do this by all of the hate that's been being circulated about Charlie Kirk over the last few months, and particularly since, as the Grey Zone reported, that Kirk refused money from Netanyahu.
Yeah.
Looking back at
I
Tommy
was going to
Robinson.
ask, do you think there's a connection? Because that's the other thing that's being said right now about this
Well, it
horrible
looks
thing.
very likely because Charlie was talking more and more. He's a very influential guy. He was going places. He was
Yeah.
another potential senator, potential president in the years to come. And when it first happened, it reminded me a bit of the attack in 2011 in Norway of Anders Breivik, when he went around and shot and killed around about 80 people in Norway, most of them young Labour activists on their summer camp. So the idea is these people in the future are going to be the enemy of the right in Norway. So let's just blow them away before they even get into their teenage or into their 20s, and get started on a career. Well, the same exactly thing is true with Charlie. He's a young guy, 31 years old. He's going places. So let's just make sure he never does. And there was so much hate speech about him around, particularly being pushed out by the trans lobby. And there was a trans connection to this guy Tyler. But you've got this hatred, online hatred, and a media hatred and lobby hatred going on. It may be that he just thought that it would be cool to do. Who knows? Maybe a bit like the guy that tried to kill Trump. There were death. Actually, the crazy thing is when now this is almost normal for people to say, "Oh, I think such and such should be killed." Well, back when I was a journalist, you would never be transmitting that. You'd be taking it to the police. If someone was to say that, I think someone should be killed, you'd be just giving the cops this information, saying, "Look, this guy." I mean, unless maybe it was a covert source of some sort that you trusted, but this is incitement to assassinate, incitement to murder. It's a very serious crime. If I was to suggest that, I'd expect the police to come around and feel my collar. What on earth do you think you're doing,
Yes.
inciting serious crime? This is not, but apparently in the days of social media, it's fine to do this. And in fact, when it came to Trump, you even had David Attenborough, the great naturalist, saying, "I think it would be a good idea if Trump was to be killed or to die
Incredible.
suddenly in order to save the planet." You had
Yeah.
David Aronovich, one of the BBC's top talk show people, also saying that Trump should die, Trump should be killed, maybe. So this is the sort of thing that was circulating before Trump was killed. So I think that may be one of the reasons that, because of all this hatred it being allowed out there these days, apparently on social media, not at all being policed, death threats, can just go circulating around. That's one of the things I think. But the other thing is that he could have been specifically groomed online. It does look as if he may have been on these antidepressant drugs, which make you extremely
That
weird and
does seem
angry.
to be a common denominator in some of these acts. the influence
And
of
so what happens is you get groomed online, and then as
drugs.
soon as something actually happens, all of that material disappears. So it never happened. Hence, maybe why he's being completely silent about it all. And the organisation that does that, I think, is it's been doing it for a long time. The guy who wrote the book's name, I think, is it William, not William Gibson. Anyway, the book is called Global Death Cult. William Ramsey, that's right. He
Right.
talks about this group called Order of Nine Angles, which is this Nazi satanic cult. And it's started in the UK, but it's spreading. It's not been proscribed, even though, of course, it's a terrorist organization. So Palestine Action has been proscribed, even though it's a non-violent direct action organization. But a Nazi satanic death cult is not proscribed. If I wanted to join it, which I don't, I could join it. And what happens there is you get promoted up through the organization. The more people you assassinate, the more people you kill. Order of Nine Angles, it's called. And like I say, William Ramsey's written a book all about it. No one seems to even know or understand this thing exists. And so this kind of thing can be used to egg people on to do these sorts of things with the promise that we are in the system. We will make sure you're okay. And whilst I'm mentioning that, you have to remember Jeffrey Epstein, because when he died in his cell, he had some guy who was a 3 times cop killer in the cell with him, a cellmate, who was on death row. And then miraculously, a few weeks afterwards, he's not on death row. There are cults out there which are very, very keen to bump people off, whoever they happen to be. And Kirk was very much just a basic, normal Christian guy. He was defending, by the way, the sorts of people, and on the abortion issue, he had people who basically took up a Church of Satan point of view that you should, if it's your child, you should be able to kill it at any stage. And he was sparring with them. So this is the sort of person he was. He was a traditional Christian. He was veering away from being Christian Zionist or pro-Israel and started to realize that, the Palestinians had a very good case and Israel was basically destroying itself from within. And also he mentioned just before he died, he was talking about the October the 7th attacks. He was saying, well, look, I've been there. Was it a stand down? Looks to me as if the Israeli army stood down and let Hamas come in.
Well, I think there's been evidence given by IDF soldiers, testimony to that effect, that they were stood down for 6 hours at exactly that time.
But think about it. If you've got a future senator, possibly even a president of the United States saying these things, this is going to rattle a few cages over in Tel Aviv, isn't it?
The aftermath of that is, there's so many interesting pieces to it, parts to it. And it kind of reminded me of the Hunger Games, that Hunger Games thing. The number of people who probably you walk down the street, they look totally normal, who thought it was okay in the moment to celebrate his death quite publicly, like it really kind of didn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything that someone gets murdered anymore if you don't like them. And I thought that was an interesting display. It showed how far it has kind of gone,
Well, look, he was branded like Trump as a Nazi, right? This is what they were saying. I think it was Breitbart, which is one of the places that Charlie Kirk used to work, who, funnily enough, you can't find them hardly ever on search engines anymore. Breitbart have just basically disappeared. But they put together a compilation of the trans activists all celebrating in the most evil, cruel, wicked fashion the idea of celebrating the guy's death. So I think this tells you the sorts of people who were creating that social media and mass media and public meeting hatred through branding someone who was actually an anti-Nazi as a Nazi. And this is all they've got, I suppose, when they're arguing. He's arguing with them. And when they run out of ways of fighting back through argument and through public discussion, when they've lost the argument, that's all they've been doing is and in fact, I think he did say at one point, because I didn't really come across Charlie until the last couple of weeks. I've been looking at a lot of his stuff in the last week or so. And what he's saying is that I'm the kind of person that you can persuade me, but don't try and guilt trip me. Don't try and tell me that there's something wrong with my character is why I'm like this. I do these things because I believe them. And if you start to say, look, your character is no good, you're a slime ball of some sort, then I'm simply going to ignore you. So don't think you can guilt trip me into changing my views. You can't. You can persuade and you can argue your way, and I'll always listen. But what doesn't work with me. In fact, it has the reverse effect. And he was making it clear that there was no way that by bribery or by guilt tripping, by trying to shame him in public, that anyone was going to change his point of view. Very, very courageous guy, in my view. Thing is, they have devised a lie. I say they, I'm talking about the oligarchy that's in charge. This is what you're supposed to think, but it's a load of rubbish. I mean, whatever it is about Vladimir Putin, we're supposed to hate him, apparently. I think the BBC's motto in the 1920s and 30s, and supposedly still, it was nation shall speak peace unto nation. And yet all they can do is make up lies about Vladimir Putin, what an evil guy he is, how he's done this, he's done that. I recently did a report on from the ex-member of Parliament, Andrew Bridgen, he's done an excellent little report with some whistleblowers from the Ukrainian Secret Service saying that the British MI6 are trafficking children from Ukraine into Britain. So what do the British press do? What does MI6 do? Is it puts articles in the British press saying Putin is trafficking children into Russia. Where actually what they're doing is an inversion here. So it's starting to get extremely sick, where the crimes that you're committing, you are just looking around for someone to blame those crimes on. So it's exactly the same with the whole Gaza-Israeli situation. So really what's happening is an accusation is really a confession. We're starting to get a complete topsy-turvy press where you can see someone is being accused of something. Well, that's probably something the British establishment are doing then, isn't it? And it doesn't take long for the viewing, listening, reading, watching public, particularly young people who are switched on, to see that you just have to reverse. It's a bit like watching an interview with Tony Blair. Everything he says, just take the opposite to be the facts.
Well, he's just been, I think, meeting with the president of I don't know what's going through Trump's mind, and the US envoy to Ukraine, Kellogg. I don't know if you've caught up with his latest pronouncements from Kiev. He sounds like, an old man with dementia. It's ridiculous listening to this. And again, as you say, all projection, all turned around, 180-degree projection. You might as well tell me. In fact, you're telling me what you're doing and your weakness.
Yes,
and
that's right. Yeah,
you're the loser.
So the accusation is a confession.
Yeah.
That's it, exactly. And that's where we are, I think, with much of the mainstream press these days, and hence. For a lot of young people are very disillusioned. Hence, this is one of the reasons why so many people turned out in London on Saturday. Yeah. They are fed up with the lies. They've just had enough, and they want to be able to make a living too. And they want a country that they feel represents them. There's somebody that represents them. At the moment, it's the World Economic Forum, BlackRock in the UK Treasury, destroying all our family businesses so that BlackRock can come and buy them up cheap. That isn't really much of a country, is it?
Well, something's got to give at some point. Maybe there was a little bit of a pressure valve, unite the kingdom, but it wasn't much of one given what's happening and what's at stake and where it could go.
Well, all I'll say is the mainstream is hopeless, but there's quite a lot of interesting stuff out there in the alternative press that's not controlled opposition. Yeah. I think we can count ourselves as not as controlled opposition.
I think we can.
Hopefully, the viewers, maybe the controlled opposition never use that phrase. I'm not sure, or maybe they say we are. Who knows what they're up to nowadays? But there's plenty of it about. And I think for me, the hope is coming through the analysis of particularly what's been going on with Gaza and Israel, slowly but surely. I mean, we've seen Mandelson have to go as the British ambassador to the United States. We've seen another individual within the special advisor in the Labour Party fall recently. It looks as if the Prime Minister Keir Starmer, they may be preparing to jettison him, because there is a lot of pressure, I think, from the substratas of the establishment in Britain to do something about the support for the genocide. I mean, this is a massive, major issue amongst many, cultural figures, celebrities, icons, even people within some of the elite institutions, universities, etc., are starting to speak out. When you've got a situation in the BBC Proms series on Radio 3 and on the television, they have these Albert Hall concerts where people can kind of walk in. They've been doing them for many years. Even though the music's gone downhill, we had an Israeli composer stand up this week and talk about Gaza and get the whole audience behind him, saying everyone in the world has got to stop this. And he's implying really that this is a sort of virus and a cancer that unless it stops now, will start spreading all around the world. And you can see the complicity of the British establishment, particularly, that he's absolutely right about that. And that for me was the highlight of the proms, never mind the music. You've got musicians and these sorts of figures starting to really speak out about this now and putting pressure on the Israeli prime minister, if you can call him a prime minister. He's just a dictator. He won't obey the rule of law. He's supposed to be in jail. He won't go to jail, and he knows that. I'm not sure if your viewers realise, but if he stops this war, he's out of government and he's in jail.
Yeah, no, we know.
Yeah. So he's in that horrible bind of a situation. I don't really feel that sorry for him. I think he should just throw in the towel and go to prison. But he seems to want to push this Israel first agenda, and this whole program is very reminiscent of the Nazis' idea of Lebensraum. The Greater Israel Project is Nazi Lebensraum. It's exactly what Hitler did. He said, "Oh, we just need some more room," and so he starts invading other countries, Lebanon, Syria now. They're just pushing out for the Greater Israel, and this, of course, is complete anathema to the indigenous people of the Middle East, which is what surprises me so much about seeing these Maoris. I mean, I don't know if they really in any way represent Maori opinion at all, standing there.
Well, they're part of a church. They're part of a church. Destiny Church is the name of the church.
Christian Zionist, no doubt.
Well, there seems to be. And the guy who was up on the stage saying, "Come on, boys, rip it up," he's their bishop. So that's
well, we have a few like that too, but they're mostly, thank God, over in the United States. But I mean, many Christians, I'm sure, and even churchgoers. I mean, it's been a complete failure of the church, I have to say, to really properly speak out about this.
Well, the church has been taken over, Tony. Look at who was dining with the Pope over the weekend. The traditional Catholic
Isaac Herzog,
everything has gone, and they're embracing all this. So everything's shifting, everything's changing.
Well, having said that, look, I hate to point it out, but the Russian Orthodox Church doesn't do this.
No, I know. In fact,
the Orthodox lot, I'm in Croatia at the moment, which is sort of part of the border between the old Roman Church and the Orthodox Church. Serbia, just up the road, is still apparently Orthodox. The Orthodox Church, as I keep reminding people, still has in its law the oath crime. The oath crime is if you ever swear an oath. That is to say, I mean, this is from the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew. In fact, what Jesus says is never swear an oath. Simply let your yes be yes and your no be no. Anything else comes from the devil. Now, this is a pretty sharp way of putting it. But of course, those who join the Jesuits, those that join the Freemasons, those that join the Church of Satan, or any other of these witchcraft-style cults where you swear oaths of secrecy, those are the ones that Christ is pointing to in this crime. And in the Orthodox Church, if you're found to be a member of a cult of any sort, you have to go in front of the congregation and confess yourself to be allowed back into the church, and you have to, make repent of it. Right? That doesn't happen in the Catholic world, I'm afraid, and it doesn't happen in the Protestant world. So there's a bit of a fault line, I think, still through Europe, which goes back all this time to the split between the Roman Church and the Orthodox Church back in the 1150s. The split between Constantinople, the Orthodox Church, and Rome, the Vatican. They had a basic.
I often wonder, Tony, if this is the actual ultimate battle that's going on above everything.
Yes, well, accelerationism, I've heard it described as Armageddonism, and I think the accelerationists themselves would agree that that's what they want. They want the end of the world because they're pushing it as far as they can. And the accelerationists are, what their aim is to accelerate the end of the world. Peter Thiel is part of this. I mean, you look at the big accelerationists around the place. Obviously, Musk he was there at the rally, at Tommy Robinson's rally, trying to accelerate division in Britain and accelerate crisis and conflict. So shoving people into poverty, getting people into camps so that poor people are fighting, killing, hating each other in Britain. This is their attitude, and the ultimate place that this is going to be fought out is between the forces of good and evil. It seems to me, people
That's
who
what I was
are public spirited, the public spirited, those that look around them and see, I want a good future for these kids, my neighbours, etc., and those that are selfish. The selfish ones are quite good at pretending to be the good guys, So they train themselves through their lives, change themselves through their lives. But I mean, look up accelerationism, look up the father of accelerationism, my old school friend, Nick Land, who I was at school with in Southeast London. He's a bit of a devious character. I mean, he had a very dark sense of humour back when he was 15, I can tell you, and he was quite an interesting character at school because he knew everything. But he and his friends have set up what is effectively a system for setting the world on fire. And it seems to me that many of the politicians don't even know about this, but they're going along with it because they think, oh, I'm going to make some money at this. No, you're just being led by the nose by the accelerationists. And he's a kind of character nowadays, I would say, although he would probably love to be talked about like this because he likes to, he's that sort of character that as a modern Aleister Crowley. So these are the people, I think, who are largely inspiring some of the sort of selfish actions around the world, including the attempt to set the Chinese off against the Americans. At that sort of level, they're really able to persuade them because people are very easily manipulable, especially once they're in a cult, particularly. And, this guy, Tyler Robinson, who knows, maybe he had a few of his buttons pressed in the right direction, a few promises made, and off he goes.
Let you get back to your little break in Croatia, Tony. Thanks for giving up almost an hour. Nice to chat with you again, and I look forward to doing it again.
Yeah, my show is at thisweek.org.uk. You'll find last week's programme, which is quite a lot about Charlie Kirk, a lot of what I've, references, all referenced. And we had a few weeks on, we had Andrew Bridget MP. We had nearly 4 hours of absolutely fascinating discussion with him because he's somebody as an ex-MP that hundreds of people have come to with grievances and things that really the press should have been dealing with, but they haven't. So Andrew was able to, put us straight on so many stories. And this is what I love to be able to do, is to provide a platform, as you're doing, for people who have something to say that are being effectively censored and blocked from doing it by this horrible corporate machine, advertising machine that seems to have taken over in this Orwellian fashion. So thisweek.org.uk is where you can find me on a Friday live. Your morning, I suppose it would be early morning. Maybe it's just, Friday early morning. For us, it's 5, 6, 7, 8 p.m. At European time. So thanks ever so much again, Paul, for doing your business with me.